What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. So today we got a project on the BMW. Going to be doing crankcase vent valve. There's a couple different reasons why you would do a crankcase vent valve on one of these cars. Sometimes they leak, cause air leaks and lean mixture faults, and we'll actually set a check engine light. They can also cause drivability problems, rough running on startup and stuff like that if they're leaking bad enough. But mine doesn't have any of those problems. What I'm experiencing is a little bit of excessive oil consumption. So the way that valve works is it's supposed to trap any oil that's in the crankcase that would normally get pushed. It recirculates the air out of the pressure out of the crankcase and puts it back in the intake manifold to be reburned. It's supposed to separate out any oil that might be oil vapors or anything like that that might be in that air. But when the valve starts to go bad, it tends to have a problem doing that and actually be pulling oil out of the oil pan and putting it into the intake manifold and burning it. I'm having a little bit of excessive oil consumption. Not excessive by BMW standards. BMW spec is a quart for every 750 miles driven. I'm having a quart for every 1,000 miles that I drive. It's not past BMW specification, but it's a little excessive as far as I'm concerned. Normally you should, in a 7,000 mile oil change interval, burn a quart or two. Right now in a 7,000 mile oil change interval, I'm almost going through the entire engine worth of oil in top ups. So to me, that's excessive. So I'm going to do this as an attempt to fix that. That excessive oil consumption could be caused by the age of the engine. Car's got 186,000 miles on it, 187,000 miles on it, I believe. As engines wear, they tend to burn oil, but a quart for every 1,000 miles is kind of excessive. So this is an attempt on my part to see if the crankcase vent valve is part of the problem. So what I've got here is all of the parts that are part of that system. You're going to have the crankcase vent valve, the return line from the crankcase vent valve to the oil dipstick tube. You're going to have the hose that comes up from the crankcase vent valve into the distribution block. I'll point that out to you when we're in there. This is the hose that comes from the crankcase vent valve to the valve cover, and then your hose that comes off of this this return line to the distribution block. And this is like a vent line that comes across to the other end of the distribution block. I'll show you where all this stuff goes when we're in there. So we're going to start getting into what needs to come apart on this, and we'll get this started. All right, so you're gonna get your cowl out, your cowl trim that goes up here out. Those are all T30s that hold in here. To get in there, you gotta take your microfilter out. It's pretty easy. It's got these little twist locks here on either side. They turn a half turn and then pop up. You pull this plastic trim out, pull your microfilter out. Undo your T30s, that cowl trim kind of like comes out and like rotates up and then pulls out. Air box has gotta come off. Take your front air intakes that go off of here into your air box off. Get your air box out. You're going to pull this vacuum line or air supply line off of the top of your boot here. You're going to get the trim piece that goes down here along the side of the brake booster off. That's this guy right here. There's supposed to be 2 clips on it. There should be one right here and one back here as well. Mine actually did not have the clips, which means somebody's been in my car before to take this stuff apart, but the 2 clips are, again, just quarter or half turns, and then they pull out. They lock into these little metal tabs right here. There's one there, and then there's a plastic one back here. So you're going to pull that out. In order to pull that out, you have to take the brake booster hose off of the booster itself, the vacuum line. That's pretty easy. I use a panel clip tool to get it off. You can use a screwdriver. It should just pry out of there. It's going to make a pop noise when it comes off because I have vacuum pressure still built up in the booster itself. Once you get that piece out, you're going to want to take your variable intake valve out. We call this a diesel valve in BMW, but this is just a valve that varies. There's 2 different length intake runners in this car. There's a short and a long runner. This flips over from the short to the long runner. This valve has 2 T40s holding it in, and then you undo this plug connection here, and then this valve pulls right out. So we're gonna work on getting everything else to the next stage of stuff off. Air intake boot has to come off. In order to do that, you have to get this. There's a worm gear clamp here, and there's another worm gear clamp down on the side of the for the throttle body, where the boot goes to the throttle body. Sometimes that worm gear clamp that's on the bottom is facing in a really bad direction. You'll just have to see where yours is at. Sometimes it's pointing straight at the ground. Other times it's tucked up underneath the edge of this idle air control valve here. So I'm gonna work on getting this stuff off, and I'll show you what you're getting at once I get it off of there. All right, so this is what I wanted to show you guys. When you're looking down at your air intake boot, these are going to be your two, put this down so I can show you. These are going to be your two hose clamps. This one right here, the smaller one, goes on the idle air control valve, and this bigger one down here is for your throttle body. Now, luckily, when I went in there, both of mine were facing up just like this, so I could get in there with a screwdriver in both of them. Sometimes this larger clamp will be like facing that way, or it'll be flipped over and completely pointed straight at the ground. So it just depends on who's worked on your car before and whether or not they've reoriented the hose clamps in there in a way that you can get to them. So now that I got that off, you're gonna have a 10 here, and there's another 10 down here underneath the throttle body, and then one here that holds this cable bracket in. You're gonna undo all those 10s, and then the other thing you have to undo is down here, there's a 13 holding the dipstick tube to the engine mount bracket. You're gonna undo that 13, pivot your dipstick tube out of the way, and then take your 10s off and pull your cable bracket out in order to be able to get your throttle body and your idle air control motor out. So I'm gonna get the dipstick tube and the cable bracket pulled off right now, and then I'll show you what that looks like torn apart. All right, so what I want to show you guys was I got the throttle body out. The idle air control valve pulls out, again, two T40s in this bracket here. This is the stud where that wiring harness was attached to. There's a plug connection here on the back. It's just a push-in style. You push the little metal tab in, pull the connector off. Two T40s. And then this part right here, where my finger is actually in a rubber grommet inside the intake manifold down in there. You can see it right there, right below the bigger opening, that smaller opening in the back. That is going to be your, where this is sitting. It's a little rubber grommet that seals into, and then the intake hose comes onto this side of this thing. So two T40s, pull this out, and then you are going to, there's 4 10s holding your throttle body on, and this is just a way I can show you easier. When you're doing that wiring harness, this stud right here is that 10 that's down there that's holding that wiring harness on. So you're going to be able to reach underneath the throttle body and feel that stud there. That's where that wiring harness is attached to. So take your 10 off there to pull your wiring harness back. So now that we have everything pulled apart in here, you can actually see this part right here is your crankcase vent valve. Let's see if I can point it out with the screwdriver a little bit better. This right here is your crankcase vent valve. It goes, there's a hose that comes off of it, goes down to your dipstick tube. There's a hose that comes off of it that goes to right here. And that other hose that connects up to the distribution manifold, which is this piece right here, is right here. And then you have a little vent line that comes off of that hose and runs around and connects to over here. So I'm gonna start working on getting these hoses off, and I'll show you once I get them off how they come apart. Alright, so I've got a couple of the hoses off. I wanted to show you how these are supposed to come apart. So these ends like this, what you're supposed to do is where these ridges are on the side here, you're supposed to squeeze this hose. So when it's on the part, you're supposed to squeeze it together like that. And what it does is it presses the plastic apart. As you can see, that's kind of an elliptical shape. When you squeeze these outside edges here, it squeezes the shorter side up and unlocks the tabs that are holding these on. Now, I will tell you that it's supposed to work that way, but some of these, especially this one, the plastic gets so hard that it's borderline. I am squeezing this literally as hard as I can right now, and you can see that I can barely, I'm not getting much flex out of it. Mind you, that's my left hand, it's not my good hand, but you can see that there's not much flex happening there. So what I do is when this is on the crankcase vent valve, this end goes on the valve cover. What I do is I get a pick, hook pick, 90 degree, whatever, underneath the edge of this plastic tab, and if you twist the plastic pick, it will pop this tab up. And to make sure that that tab doesn't click back down, if you pull tension on this hose away from the crankcase vent valve, and if you're on this end, if you're away from the valve cover, if you pull this away, undo that tab, it'll kick itself out a little bit and it will not snap back in, and then you can flip to the other side and you can pop the clip up on this side and pull it off. So when you're doing these hoses, that's, to me, is the easiest way, is to use a 90 degree pick. This is that little vent line that goes across the top. This has the same connection on this side where it goes to the distribution rail. On the other end where it connects to the hose, it has a little bit of a different connector, but it has these little tabs on the side that you have to take this hose, push it down further onto that nipple that it comes off of, squeeze these tabs in on the side, and then pull the hose up and it'll pull right off. Let's get in there. We're gonna get our crankcase vent valve off now. I've got some light in there. I'm sure you guys can see a little bit better in there. There's two screws. There's one here and one here holding your crankcase vent valve on. I believe they're 25s. I'll correct myself later if I'm wrong, but we're gonna undo that, and then I'm gonna get this. So there's a little bit of a trick to this, doing this in the car. You're actually supposed to take the intake manifold off to do this job. There's a trick to doing it in the car, and I'll show you outside of the car how you're gonna do it inside the car, just because it's too hard to show you on the inside. So I'm gonna get this crankcase vent valve out and then I'll show you the trick. All right, so this trick I'm gonna show you for getting this out is why you're supposed to take the intake manifold out of the car in order to do it, but I'm going to show you how to do it with it in the car. This hose right here twist locks onto the crankcase vent valve. So it actually goes like this. That's how it is in place inside the car, is like this. So crankcase vent valve is bolted to the intake manifold. This hose comes through a hole in a runner, runs alongside another runner, which is right here, and then comes up in between the two of them and connects into that air distribution runner on top of the intake manifold. So the problem with this is trying to get this thing to pivot like this inside the car. A lot of times this hose breaks. That's why I got a new one and why I recommend having one on hand, because what you're going to do is you're going to squeeze this hose, or actually when you try to, so your crankcase valve is going to be bolted in place. So when you rotate this hose down, this whole part of this hose here, this elbow and this nipple that comes off of it, are going to hit the side of the engine. What you're going to do is you're going to just push it, and it's going to flex this hose really, really bad, probably to the point that it looks like it's going to break. And you're going to spin it around till it gets to the open point, which is in this area right here, and then it pulls apart. When you put your new one in, you're going to put your crankcase vent valve in there to where this connection is lined up with that hole. Feed your hose in through the hole in the intake runner, slide it on there till it clips together. You should be able to look down in there and see that these two are pushed together all the way, and then you're going to rotate your new hose up into place, up through the intake runner until it's in the right position. Your new hose is also going to have to be flexed. Luckily, the plastic that you're dealing with the new hose is not as brittle as the old hose, so the likelihood of breaking it is very slim. I've never broken a new one. I've broken plenty of old ones, but I've never had a problem with breaking a new one. So I'm going to go get everything put together there, and I'll show you the process in the car. It's kind of hard to show you because I can't really get the camera in there, but I'll show you what it's kind of a struggle, but I'll show you what it looks like. All right, so as you guys could see, it's pretty hard for me to show you what to do. I got the new crankcase vent valve put in there. The connection that you're trying to do is this one right here where my finger is at. That's the hole right here through the intake runner. This is the runner here. This is a hole between this runner here, and there's another runner up on top. Your tube comes out right here. This is it right here. It comes through the intake runner, and then as you can see right there, it runs back that direction and then comes back up through here and connects to this distribution block. The space you're trying to twist it inside of is that space right there. Like I said, it's going to be really tight. You're going to hit that. There's a coolant tube down there that this nipple is going to hit as you're coming up. Just make sure that you flex the hose this direction towards the driver's side of the car as you're twisting that hose up so as to not put too much stress on the end of this nipple and break it off. Another thing I want to point out to you guys is before you put your new crankcase vent valve back in your car, there's a plug that goes on this nipple right here that's on this old crankcase vent valve. Make sure you transfer it to your new one, because if you don't, when you're done, you're going to have an air leak. This is a dead air leak right into the intake system. It'll cause it to idle incorrectly. You can drive around like that, but it'll eventually set a fuel mixture too lean fault. So I'm going to go ahead and get the rest of the hoses put back on, as you'll see here, and we're going to finish this job up and be done with everything. One more note is the hose that comes off of the dipstick tube is right down there. You can see it. It doesn't have a hose on it right now. It runs up underneath all of the wiring harnesses and stuff over here into the bottom of the crankcase vent valve. So let's get everything put together, guys. All right, so as you can see, I got the crankcase vent valve done. Not too difficult to do. Like I said in the video, it's easier to take. You're supposed to take the intake manifold out of the car. It's not necessary. If you don't feel comfortable with the, flexing the new hose and you're putting it in, by all means, take the intake manifold out. But as I showed you, it's not necessary. You guys have any questions about this job, or what tools are involved or anything like that? I'll put a tool list down below in the description. But if you have any questions about this job, please comment down below. I will answer any questions anybody has. Don't forget to like this video. It lets me know that this is helping people out and this is stuff that you guys enjoy. And please subscribe to the channel. It helps me grow the channel and helps get me out there to other people. So I'd appreciate it if you could subscribe. And I'll see you guys later.